Thanks for coming. On behalf of, I'm Michael Keenan, Deputy Minister of Transport Canada. On behalf of Transport Canada and our partners in the ITF, thanks for coming today. I'm actually going to be here for just a few minutes, but I'll be here in spirit with you throughout the day. The work that you're doing in this area and the work that you're doing today in this roundtable on shared mobility solutions and automated driving is really important for the future transportation policy. And we appreciate the long-standing relationship that Canada has with the ITF, and we particularly appreciate the fact that people have come from multiple countries, from North America, Europe, and Asia to be here today, so thank you very much. And in the spirit of integrated mobility solutions, which is about, ultimately it is it's figuring out the whole solution to that includes and encompasses the very difficult last mile. And getting into this room today, you actually overcame the difficult last mile. So well done. I've been in this department for about 7 months. I'm a long-standing senior official in the Government of Canada, but I'm new to Transport Canada. And it took me about 6 months to figure out how to move around this complex, actually. So well done, and everybody seems to have been here on time. I could talk a lot about the economic trends in terms of the sharing economy, shared mobility, the new business models, the network transportation companies that have come out of nowhere and market caps at gazillions of dollars. I think you guys know all that. I think you folks know all that. It's really interesting in the sense that there's that expression that people make fun of coming out of Silicon Valley, that the future is here faster than you think. This feels like a case where the future is arriving faster than we think. And I know in the policy work in our department on mobility and automated driving and new modes of mobility, there was a sense that, yeah, these changes are 5 years out, they're 10 years out. They don't feel like they're 5 years out anymore. They don't feel like they're 10 years out anymore. They feel like they're coming at us pretty quickly. I accompanied Minister Garneau to the G7 Transport Ministers Forum in Japan in September. And it was really interesting in terms of how, I would say, captured and focused G7 transport ministers are on these issues. They feel changes that are coming, and they're trying to figure out what this means for, as national governments, what they do with transportation policy, what they do with infrastructure policy, what it means for liability systems, what it means for privacy, what it means for data sharing. And so I would say, this is a field where it's like a new game where the rules haven't been fully established yet. The business models that are driving this, the demographics, things like an aging society, an urbanized society, are driving this in a way that that it's hard to predict. And I think governments, you could feel both a sense of tremendous opportunity and optimism, plus an uncertainty and a discomfort in terms of, well, what do we do now, and where do we go from here? And I think that I was struck by the other point in my relatively short time in transport and transportation policy, is that the problems used to be defined as specific things. We need a train system from here to there. We need a better airport policy. We need to figure out what we're doing on the sort of blue skies policy. And we need to think about things like environmental impacts, greenhouse gas emissions. And it's becoming much more of how are we going to make the system work? How are we going to make the whole system work better? Where are there bottlenecks in the mobility solutions for goods and mobility solutions for people? Where's the thing that's stopping the last mile from working well? And in that context, working through the discussions you're having today, I think is very helpful in pointing to governments. I mean, we're going to be selfish and we're going to try and extract as much as we can for Canada, but for all the governments that are represented around this table and all the people that come together at the ITF, about describing where these changes are going, where there will be bottlenecks in the integrated mobility solutions and where there will be big changes required to capture the opportunity from cooperative mobility from automated vehicles. And what that means for national policies and what that means for local policies. How do we change our regulatory frameworks? How do we think of liability differently and change liability frameworks? And I think that the deep structural tension between data sharing and creating and pulling together the information so people can make informed decisions, whether it's governments on infrastructure or individuals trying to get from point A to point B while protecting privacy is actually a very fraught field. And so I think, I'm not going to tell you anything about the trends. You're going to tell us about the trends. But your advice and your insights as to where governments need to think, there's a solution that there is that where there needs to be a solution that involves governments, where all the parties cannot do it themselves. So there needs to be, well, actually, let me back up on two things. Where there's a law or policy framework or regulation that was based on an old system that's actually kind of crumbling and a new system is coming up and it's having unintended consequences, unintended negative consequences for the new system, I think we need to be told in very clear terms. The second is where there is a different kind of solution or a different kind of policy that needs to be created to enable the new world. We need to be told that in very clear terms, because if the precision and the clarity about where these problems and opportunities are is very helpful to I would say the political decision-making process. And it's so complex. It's so fast changing and it's so uncertain. It's hard for decision makers to zero in on where they need to take action. And so we're really looking forward to the results of this. The other thing I should say is you're going to have to bear with us because you're actually having this discussion in terms of cooperative mobility systems and automated vehicles in the context of our local city building a better mobility solution in terms of the LRT, and that's the jackhammering you're hearing. So please bear with us. So I look forward to the results of this. Look forward to the advice and the insights that you can offer in terms of where to look at changing policies, regulations, and laws. And ultimately, we're going to need to do two things in the ITF family. One is to learn from everybody else's experimentation. And the second is we're going to have to find some, I think, solace. I wouldn't say solace. We're going to have to find some good company and innovative solutions, because we're going to be breaking ground and doing things that will make people uncomfortable on issues like dealing with aging population, on issues like privacy. And I think unless we actually can start pointing to some international best practices, it's going to be hard to avoid losing our way on this journey to new policy for a new world. With that, I think I'll say I'll wrap it up. I don't know, Christiane, do we have? I have a few more minutes. Do we want to go to a roundtable? Do we want to sort of throw out a couple of questions, or what do we want to do at this point? I would turn it to the chair, probably.
Yeah, if people have questions they'd like to ask the first chair.
So I have a quick question. I'm just Bethany. I represent Deptuy, the Canadian Urban Transit Research and Innovation Consortium.
Speak up.
Oh yeah, over the jackhammer.
Yeah.
Do my best for a booming voice. So just in terms of the policy guidance, you're asking for advice, and I think a lot of people here are happy to provide it. But in terms of organization within government, could you give us a little bit of insight into how it is that the ministry is potentially leading the coordination of policies in other ministries on this file? Because I think what you'll hear from today probably is that it's multi-ministerial and most national governments this issue of integrated mobility and advanced mobility. So what is the role of transport in helping to guide that by other ministries? Are you the streaming portal through which other ministries are acting, or are you going to be parceling out some of the duties of this mandate or this policy article?
There's two parts to that. It's a great question, and there's two parts to that because Canada's a pretty decentralized federation, and so I would say at Transport Canada we feel we have a role in leading on this and bringing together parties on this to come up with solutions. And our role is the fact that we have a responsibility on behalf of the country to enable the safest, most efficient, and environmentally responsible means of moving goods and people to support the quality of life of the country. And we're in the kind of people side of this equation. I mean, it intrinsically becomes the good side. You know, I have both Uber and Uber Eats on my iPhone, right? So if I want to go somewhere, or if I need some, or if I need a chicken korma quickly, I can do it either way, or I use either service. And so we're doing that on behalf of the other ministries in the Government of Canada, and we're driving an agenda on what we call the traveler, which is helping people get better mobility solutions that meet their needs. We have a very strong kind of middle-class Canadian agenda on the part of the current government. So we're pulling that together across ministries and things like, and it is transport, it's the privacy institutions. It's our industry department does a lot of work with the automobile sector, and is looking at developing, looks favorably upon developing new high information sectors like a transportation mobility solution sector. So we pull together I would say what we call the federal family at the federal government level. And we're working, but some of the most important work is with provincial governments who have run a lot of transportation policy that directly affects people. They're largely in charge of regional transit systems. The jackhammering here is for a city LRT. Federal government pays for some of that, but it's really a local government led initiative with the support of the province. So we're working in a federal provincial councils to develop strategies in terms of leveraging connected vehicles and automated vehicles for mobility solutions. And the shared mobility and cooperative mobility comes into that big time. And like you have to start reimagining how you use space in our large cities in terms of parking and stuff like that. So it's across the federal departments, but our success will come from having some decent collaboration between the Government of Canada and provincial governments. And it will probably be 3 or 4, I would say, leading governments that are really, provincial governments that really want to do something where we'll set some best practices that will then spread across the Canadian Federation, which I think is a bit of a microcosm for how we're going to do it internationally, right? It's the same kind of solution. And I think you'll see in Canada, you'll see some interesting innovation. I'll give an example. In BC has effectively blocked Uber from coming into BC, and so there's a kind of, like most, Canada seems like most countries has very interesting and I would say fairly rigid rules around the taxi industry and the livery industry, and BC has its own sort of weird manifestation of that. I think there's going to be a sea change there pretty soon, and that's one of our larger provinces, and you're going to see them move quite radically because the pressure is building, because they have all of these old laws and old institutions that are blocking innovation and new service models, and it's going to crumble, and they know it, and they're working hard on it. So I think we have to work across governments to do that. We're well placed to do that because it's our day job, and for other people's it's sort of a sideline. And I think pretty optimistic that that we can make some progress here. We have a lot to learn from other countries, though. And that's why we're so happy that you've come here today, so we can do that.
Question in the back?
So, my name is Jonathan. I'm CEO of Zenride, your driver analytics platform. Probably the token Silicon Valley guest.
Excellent.
I'm really excited to be in this room and to meet all of you and to learn about how policymakers think about the future of transportation. One thought that I've had and I couldn't get a good answer for, and I think the audience in this room, maybe you have an interesting position for, is fast forward 15, 20 years, think about the societal impact of mass introduction of this technology. And I'm curious, there's a very clear positive impact on safety. That's what my company is focused on. That's what a lot of the discussion is about. That's what the data shows. How are we thinking of the societal impact of getting many, many people off the road, giving some people a new job to search for, or a few more hours to spend in their leisurely pastime? Is this something the government is thinking about? Something that people in this room are spending cycles on?
I think the government's thinking about it. I guess it's better if I go here. I think the government is thinking about that in general terms. And I would say it has some of the societal environmental benefits of this are quite compelling from a government perspective because it speaks to a number of challenges that government sees. Aging is a key one, for example. And I was struck when we were in Japan how I would say, you could see the key players in Japan have an incremental approach to CVAV development. But the most compelling sort of benefit I think that they see in Japan is the aging population and how it's going to help particularly these small towns in Japan, which are they're almost like pictures of our global future in terms of very high percentages of those communities with people over 60, over 70. And they're grabbing this hard because they see it as meeting that social demographic need. And so I think governments see that, and I think it makes governments pretty excited about that, and they want to try and capture that sort of societal upside. I don't think anybody in government has any idea what it's really going to look like in 15 years, which is why we need advice from people like you in terms of making sure we don't accidentally and unintentionally block positive developments, because we think we know what's in the future, but we're wrong because people tend to get the future wrong a lot. Or B, we just haven't thought about what the real unintended consequences of our policies are. So it will be interesting, and I think most people. The irony is that some of these solutions that are being grabbed a hold of by the sort of newer generations of urban dwellers, the so-called millennials. But ultimately, I think it's going to be sort of for our older population that some of these shared solutions are going to be so incredibly helpful.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Do you want to wrap? There was somebody who was raising a question there. Do you want to wrap up? Or?
We have time for another question.
Barely, it's a quick one.
It's not. Yeah, I'm Jane Latham. I'm with Toyota Research Institute. And some of the best practices that we've all learned emerged from the large, complex, well-funded field operational tests in the European community, led by the European Commission through its federation of member states. And I wonder if on your list of really aggressive encouragement of learning and development, you're considering that as an action?
I think our short answer, because we're out of time, I think our first priority is making sure we don't do any harm, first of all. So that make sure we don't clean up policies that have unintended consequences. And second of all, I think that there is a role on the part of governments to support in endeavors like this, because there's such a massive sort of externality to the work, and that we need to help sort of line up incentives by coming to the table and supporting it, so those externalities can flow out. So I think the short answer is yes.
Thank you very much, and thank you for hosting the meeting here, so that we have an opportunity for everybody to get together and discuss these important topics.
Well, thank you, and I'm looking forward to seeing the results of your work today. Thanks a lot, and have a good day.